Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. Happy holidays, everybody. The trillion-dollar business of sports does not stop. The news, the deal-making, the marketing. And so the person who I'm sure you would most want to end the new year, we'll do it next week too, but to get close to ending the new year, it's the intergalactic worldwide editor for Reuters Worldwide, Global, and Otherwise, Dan Colarusso. That's a long title. Sorry, I made the last half up.
You made it up and then doubled it, which is great for me. If only it reflected in my paycheck.
Yeah, let's not go there today, okay?
I'd be like Roger Goodell.
Yeah, good segue. We'll get to
Look at that
second. But you're in a good mood, so let's not reflect any of your salary issues. But look, it's better to be at Reuters these days than it is at ESPN. The toxic environment, as one female employee described the company culture. John Skipper steps down. And Adrienne Lawrence files the most recent sexual harassment complaint against her own company. And I'm quoting from that, no editorializing. ESPN has failed to address the deeply ingrained culture of sexism and hostile treatment of women. We all grew up watching ESPN. What's going on there?
Look, I think ESPN, it's a problem with size. It's a problem being so big and so powerful that there becomes maybe a layer of unaccountability, and the fact that sports is a male-dominated world, and it is a petri dish for this kind of stuff. The John Skipper situation, also with him stepping away from his post to deal with some addiction-related issues, I believe. So this situation at ESPN is going to have a dramatic impact on both Disney, which obviously owns ESPN as a parent company, and they just did a huge deal with Rupert Murdoch. So now they have a lot more at stake. They need to scale up everything. And Hearst, which many people in the media business know, maybe the general public isn't as aware, Hearst has owned a small piece of ESPN and has really used that royalty to its advantage over the past decade, essentially almost like free money that gets paid into it, and it is able to spend that on deals, acquisitions, expansion into digital, all the things that Hearst is known for. So it's a really interesting trickle that outside of the bombast or the sensational nature of what's going on at ESPN and how public it is, there's this corporate underlying thing here that ESPN used to be a go-to franchise for whoever was near it. It was like, it was a cash machine. Will it stay a cash machine? Will its problems swallow it up? Will there be another upstart? Is this an opening for someone else? A lot of really interesting questions at a time when ESPN is more vital to two big media companies, maybe than it's ever been before.
I'm going to ask you, as the expert on all things media related, does the Fox ESPN deal get done and implemented quickly?
I would imagine yes. I mean, I don't know if implemented quickly, but it gets done because they wouldn't have gotten as far unless there was some kind of ability or strategy around getting past regulators and getting through the regulatory process. I shouldn't say getting past regulators, right? That's pejorative. Getting through the regulatory process. And I think to some degree that'll happen. How fast it gets integrated, not sure. But even if integration is a little halting, the cash flow is still there around some of the live rights and some of the audience that you have on the sports side. So I think it's an interesting deal.
Well, yeah, and it's been put in electoral college terms these days, clear path to regulatory approval. They wouldn't have seen it unless they saw the clear path. It is also clear that the worldwide leader in sports, we're not piling on, we're just factual here as far as stability is concerned. Layoff talent, layoff behind-the-scenes folks. Now they acquire a whole bunch of assets in Fox Regionals. So it's difficult to create a stable business plan if you're over there right now, right?
I would think. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. ESPN paid up a ton of money for college bowl rights, for all kinds of sports rights. When it turns out with that bowl exhaustion, when it starts to creep into the bottom line or whatever expansion you're doing, when it seems like the money tree is just spewing more than you can handle, you make all these hires. You don't feel disinclined to spend on talent, and you've seen them pull back from that. And that's indicative of all media. I mean, you'll see the networks with their nightly anchors get more and more, I hate to say anonymous, but less well-known. You don't need the big-ticket nightly news anchor anymore. Does ESPN need all the high-priced talent? Will people just tune in for the games and the highlights? Or will they learn to run the business like that? And that's the real rub now. Where is the value created? And that's what ESPN is going through a rather painful exercise in discovering, I think.
Well, we're going to find out. Now, from a stability context, and ESPN's not there, to a probably more stable context, let's talk about Roger Goodell's new 5-year, $200 million contract. It's basically $40 million a year. Jerry Jones claims victory because it's fundamentally shifted to incentives. And, Jerry says if Roger knocks it out of the ballpark, he'll be rewarded, but there are no layups here. And it helps his whole business because it's incentive-based. Roger could make more than $200 million over that 5-year period. And some people are saying it's his last 5-year extension. What do you say?
If I'm Roger Goodell, I have to take this deal, right? Because it does give me the path to, considerable wealth. But it's interesting. The incentives are important because Goodell is almost in the situation of a general manager rebuilding a franchise. He can't, if the deal was straight out cash, the pressure on him to turn this thing around more quickly would be so high that it'll be almost untenable, and he'd be almost guaranteed to get moved out or get more agitation from the owners. Making it an incentive deal is really nice because it gives him the ability to wiggle. What'd you say? It was 4 years or 5? I keep
Five
forgetting.
at $40 million apiece.
5 at $40 million. It gives him 3 years to kind of right the ship in terms of the national anthem, in terms of viewership, in terms of digital expansion, in terms of international. If these are the bogeys he has to hit, some will be easy, some will be tough. But at least it's incentive-based, so the owners don't have to feel like they're paying him and the needle isn't moving more quickly enough for them. I mean, you tell me. You know the foundational issues facing the NFL. If you were an owner, do you like this deal? Do you not like this deal?
I love this deal, and I probably wouldn't have had the leverage to do it if I didn't have Jerry Jones be my bulldog. So that worked really well. And also, you know this because on the business side, if you're a corporate CEO, you're constantly balancing the guaranteed piece versus the incentive piece. And since the NFL does not have stock options, this is the next best thing. Also, there is indirect reward and direct reward. The indirect is how best he calms the controversies, the kneeling, the Ray Rices, etc. And that's part of, let's call it his base. But the incentive is based on hard dollars. And so the hard dollars are not who kneels less. The hard dollars are corporations buying in because people kneel less. And so I think it's a great move for the NFL. And Roger may look back year 6 and say it's a great move for him.
One other thing on that, and we've seen this in the media business a lot. A lot of great media companies have been hamstrung by their inability to let go of their legacy businesses and their legacy revenue streams, and they haven't moved aggressively enough to new ones. I think what Roger Goodell is going to have to figure out by the end of year 2 of this new deal, or maybe by the middle of year 2, depending on how next season goes, is what is the legacy the NFL has to leave behind? What's that legacy business? Is it not about the massive TV deal anymore? It might be, but it might not be. Is it something else? Is there another piece of the NFL economy that needs to be relegated to second tier as they put some money into pushing out on other fronts? And that's going to be the hard part for Goodell. I don't know how much youth there is at the top ranks of the NFL management and how many millennials are surrounding Roger Goodell, but it wouldn't be a terrible thing if he put together a task force to figure out what gets left behind and where to go next.
Well, and you heard it here first. We've got 5 years. Roger Goodell is uncertain about what happens after 5 years from now. I don't know what happens after 5 days from now for me, but that's a good question to start asking. And I think the 5 years from now issue is resolved by him, if he has leverage to continue, primarily by how he satisfies his legacy going forward. So I think you are absolutely accurate that it is never too early to start working on legacy. Speaking about legacy, let's end this pre-Christmas one with a feel-good. Stephen Piscotty, Cardinals guy, decided, and the Cardinals could have sent him anywhere. They maneuvered him to the Oakland A's during the winter meetings because he was then allowed to be closer to his mom, who was diagnosed with ALS earlier this year. Billy Beane, the Oakland A's guy, says that's what makes the Cardinals one of the classiest organizations in sports, while Cardinals president of baseball operations John Mozeliak could say you could trade him anywhere. He said you traded him simply for geographic or sentimental reasons. No, you traded him because it was the right thing to do. Look for the Cardinals to carry that karma next year. It's a really cool feel-good story. What do you think?
It is. I saw it before you mentioned it to me. I had seen it, obviously, in the press. Great story. Great for the Cardinals to repay a player who's been loyal and a great performer, to understand kind of the humanity beyond the numbers off the field. Sports leaves a lot of franchises, whether it's NCAA powerhouses or major league franchises. They deal with a very volatile market, and they leave a lot of wreckage behind in lives, whether it's career minor leaguers who never get a chance, injured young guys, CTE, whatever afflictions you come down in sports, that the Cardinals were able to display this level of humanity, and it's not the first time for the franchise, and it's not the first time in sports. We just don't hear a ton about it. I think it really was a telling move by both franchises, and I think how the A's handle it going forward with whatever time off he needs, or however he chooses to perform, or however he chooses to manage the situation. I think it is a great Christmas story. Terrible tragedy for the family, but humanity shown in a place where it's often discounted.
Yeah, definitely often discounted, and you can tell the organizations that have the leverage. And by the way, it's not lost on teams who may use this kind of story to attract free agents in the future. Players now with more leverage tend to go to the right places that do good by other players, and this is a good example. And you mentioned just in passing the NCAA powerhouses and juggernauts. We'll get into that as well, as well as the top stories from last year. That's something everybody can kind of wait for post-Christmas, and we do that every year, and then we start the year after with the top look-aheads of 18. And we talk about the big-time college stuff, and who better to focus on it as we get into the big-time bowls now than Larry Scott. He was at Harvard's men's tennis team. He was with the WTA, the ATP. He was a tennis guy, and then he was appointed in 2009 as the commissioner of the Pac-12 Football Conference. They're not in the playoffs this year. They beat the heck out of each other, but yet they are one of the strongest networks, including the Pac-12 network. And by the way, before we even do this, too many bowls, not too many bowls.
Too many bowls, but then again, I'm not a huge college football fan. So too many, and I'm not a degenerate gambler. So yeah, too many bowls for me. Maybe there's enough. I guess the numbers tell the story. Do people watch? Do people go? Are there sponsors? As long as there's sponsors for all of them, we can't legitimately say there are too many bowls.
Well, and it's a good answer, because too many bowls and too many bowls for you are two very different questions. And when we look for your top 17 and top 18 stories, we're not looking for anything college football-wise. But, I can't make excuses for your lack of diversity. But here's Larry Scott, who is one of the most diverse individuals out there talking about the Pac-12.
We think we have college football, but we also have basketball. We even have tennis. We have politics. We have academia, a whole bunch of stuff in one human being who happens to be the commissioner of the Pac-12. He's been the CEO of the WTA. He was also the captain of the Harvard men's tennis team. We'll get into all of that. Larry Scott, how's that for an intro?
That sounds pretty good. Thank you.
So let's get to the matter at hand. First of all, we are at college football, college basketball time, and you basically have the ability to tout something other conferences don't, which is a watershed deal with Alibaba, the Pac-12, the China deal, penetrating China like no other college football conference. Talk a little bit about that.
So this is really unique to our conference and our schools being, the leading universities and biggest academic brands on the West Coast. schools like UCLA, Stanford, Washington. I mean, these are major global universities, and I was really impressed when I got here about the focus on globalization of the university, and kind of quickly posited to the presidents and chancellors of the universities, if sports is supposed to be the front porch of the universities, and globalization is this trend and this important strategic priority for the university, is there a role for sports to play in that dimension? And the leadership of our university was very excited about it. So that led us down a path where, tapping into some of my prior experience in pro tennis, where I spent a lot of time internationally, a lot of time in Asia and China, focused on developing opportunities for student athletes to participate in sporting competitions and developing some relations over there, which not only resulted in great trips and great experiences for the student athletes, but has created a platform where our universities can tell their story, engage with prospective students, alumni, strategic partners they have over there, and there's a growing commercial interest as well.
Let's talk for a minute about television, because you're a pioneer there again. Pac-12 TV, it doesn't start out of whole cloth. You had to bring Fox and ESPN to the table. You had to prop up rights. You had to get the presidents and chancellors to buy into your vision. How does that all happen?
Well, we definitely had to develop some consensus around doing things differently than we had done in the past. It started with getting an agreement that we would pool all media rights in the center and not have national packages versus local school-controlled packages. So, that was kind of...
it was Green Bay Packer-esque of the NFL, right?
Yeah, well, stealing a page from the most successful sports league starts with, bundling. Yeah. All of your rights in the center and being able to, make the most of the opportunity. But for us, it also came with agreeing to share revenue equally, which, was something behind the scenes, but a critical factor in getting our universities to believe that rising tide would float all boats, that they would do better collectively with a cohesive package, but all had a benefit the same way. So that was key. And then developing a hedge strategy where we tried to maximize revenue and exposure through third-party licensing of rights, which we were fortunate to be able to do successfully with ESPN and Fox, but holding back enough so that we could get in the business of starting our own media company. We believed that over time technology would evolve and change, and really were intrigued with the idea that we could be masters of our own destiny and control our own programming, because, core to our mission is not just, revenue sports, football, men's and women's basketball. It's also about promoting Olympic sports. Pac-12 wins more NCAA titles than any other. We've got all these Olympians and wanted exposure and a promotional vehicle for those sports as well. Knew we had to do our own thing if we were going to have a platform for that. So we were fortunate that we were able to launch our own network, do it ourselves. And little did I know that the world would change as rapidly as it has, but it's really caused us to feel good about that decision, because now we see direct to consumer, we see these technology companies coming on board, we see over the top emerging, and we're in it and we're engaging with fans and viewers and distributors, and have a deeper understanding of some of the dynamics and changing landscape that others might.
Well, the holding back from the big guys and the equal revenue share are always visionary concepts, and every leader wants to facilitate that. But it also takes, I guess, a little bit of table pounding and a little bit of leverage and a lot of advocacy to pull that off at the same time. Hard to do?
Very hard to do. I think for any commissioner, people focus a lot on, the business acumen and what they see externally, but it's often, the diplomatic efforts behind the scenes don't get a lot of attention. That is really the art, I think, of leading a successful league. of any kind, because members have different interests. We've got big schools, small schools, urban schools, rural schools, public schools, private schools, strong football schools, strong basketball schools, strong women's gymnastics schools, with a lot of different masters to serve. So the art form is really about creating a vision that everyone can buy into, and compromise around, and getting people to believe in the idea that everyone will be better off if we're able to achieve certain things collectively that otherwise can't be achieved on your own. Because it does, it is give and take. It is compromise along the way, whether it's in how you share revenue, which schools or sports are going to be on TV, the times you play. There's a lot that goes into it, of course.
Larry Scott, there's another issue too. You talked about 7,000 student athletes that you directly represent. You have a history with the WTA of equal prize money in tennis. You have Title IX hanging out there. How do you reconcile the gross revenue production disparities between football and basketball and your obligation to deal with all of these other sports as well?
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed working in sports where you feel like you're making a contribution, just beyond the commercial success. As you point out, one of the things I took a lot of pride in at the WTA was the fight for equality and social justice, and one of the things I love about being in college sports and at the Pac-12 is associated with the universities doing things the right way that are changing the world in a very positive way from a macro sense. And in athletics, with 7,000 student athletes, many of whom are the first in their family to go to college, about a third of whom are on significant scholarships and are able to graduate debt-free, very different from, the typical student. There's a lot of great opportunity, a lot of great things happening for young men and women because of intercollegiate athletics in the Pac-12, maybe even getting into better schools academically than they would get into otherwise, that I get to see day in, day out when I visit our campuses, when I work with our coaches and programs. So I'm just very excited about what the mission of intercollegiate athletics is about. Not necessarily that which gets all the media attention, but from the seat that I sit in and the interactions I'm able to have with our universities, I see the thousands of student athletes benefiting from the system. So I do believe deeply in the intercollegiate athletics model, that these are students, that they're going to school, and through sport they're getting opportunities for an education and financial support for that's going to help them be better off throughout their whole life as a result. And for the precious few, and I really mean precious few, I'm talking about 2% about of our 7,000 student athletes that are good enough and have the desire to want to go on and make sports their career, they have that opportunity as well.
Should they be paid? Are they paid already? Should they be paid in the Power 5? Should there be recruiting restrictions put on it? That all is going to shake out over time. What's your stance?
Yeah. So, and it's currently being litigated. My stance is they should not be paid salaries. They should not be employees. They should be students first and foremost, but they should be treated extremely well and supported in terms of, the ability to have academic success, to be supported in terms of medical coverage, to be given every opportunity to be successful in whatever they want to do. But I don't believe that they should be treated as professionals. I think that comes next. College is a great pathway for those that want to do that want to play pro sports and get paid, and they can, depending on the rules of any particular sports league, that's what governs when they can go to the pro leagues. So college, the great thing about the Pac-12 and the other big conferences is, for those that want to go the pro sports route, they can do it, and take advantage as much as they want of the educational opportunity. For those that first and foremost, want the educational opportunity, they do that and then go on to something else in their life.
Well, finally, so as a WTA CEO, it's 40% increase in prize money and that $88 million Sony deal and the $750 million in facilities. You take on a new job in a sport you're familiar with in July of 2009. Has it been everything that you thought it would be? Surprised with how your accomplishments have resonated? A lot more to be done. What's your emotional take on the transition?
I didn't fully know what to expect, to be honest. I knew that, and what I was attracted to first and foremost was the quality of the universities, and loved being associated with quality people, quality brands, and I knew there was a sense that they wanted to take a fresh look at their media approach, their marketing approach, and I thought my background and skills would translate. And I was passionate about it because I was a student athlete myself. I knew I would enjoy that. But, beyond that, there was a ton I didn't know about the politics of intercollegiate athletics, the dynamics of who you work with on the campuses, and I really, really have loved it. But my favorite part of it is the opportunity to engage with the student athletes themselves when I travel around to the competitions and the campuses. As you know, because you enjoy getting out to campuses and teaching, keeps you young, keeps you thinking fresh, keeps you on your toes, and always evolving your perspective on things. So I really enjoy being in an environment around a lot of young people in an environment like universities where people are challenging conventional norms and thinking about changing the world.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. The producer, Alex Cohn. Associate producers, Freddie Joyner and Ryan Warner. Assistance provided by Carla Swadek, Tanner Simpkins, and Ronnie Sokach. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso. I'm Rick Horrow. Thanks again for listening. See you next time on Keeping Score.